They called an emergency all-hands meeting on a Thursday. The email subject line was sterile. Q2 operational adjustments, mandatory attendance. But the whispers floating through the office weren't so bland. Layoffs. Department merges. Budget slashes. By noon, the marketing team sat shoulder to shoulder in the glass-walled conference room, trying not to look nervous. I sat near the end of the table, notebook in hand, pretending to look calm. The air smelled like stale coffee and panic. Cheryl, our department head, clicked her heels as she entered, a tight smile stretched across her face like plastic wrap. "Let's get started," she chirped, flipping open her iPad. She spoke in corporate riddles for 10 minutes, citing market volatility, ongoing restructuring, and difficult but necessary decisions. No one interrupted. We all knew what was coming. Then she said my name. "Danielle, could you stay back for a moment once we wrap up?" 20 pairs of eyes darted toward me, then quickly looked away. I forced a nod. Once everyone else shuffled out, Cheryl motioned for me to close the door behind them. She didn't offer a seat. Didn't ask how I was. Just stared at me with that same glassy smile. "We've decided to retain you, with a necessary salary adjustment," she said, as if it were a favor. My pulse kicked in my throat. "How much of an adjustment?" 60%, she said casually, like she was reading off a lunch order. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" 60%, she repeated, slowly this time, as if I were the one not understanding. She went on before I could respond, talking about team spirit, survival mode, and how everyone had to make sacrifices. She even tossed in a compliment. "You're resourceful, Danielle. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. You should be grateful we kept you at all." Grateful. For losing over half my income. Grateful, when I'd worked weekends, rebuilt client campaigns, and saved 2 major accounts last quarter without so much as a thank you email. No performance issues. No misconduct. No warning. Just punishment disguised as mercy. I felt the heat rise in my neck, but I said nothing. I simply nodded, turned, and left the room. She didn't even say goodbye. At my desk, I stared at the monitor. Everything blurred. 60%. Rent. Groceries. Student loans. Gone, gone, gone. But somehow, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, my fingers still on the keys, the hum of the office growing distant. People around me were pretending not to notice. Pretending everything was fine. Just like I had, for the past 2 years. I opened a blank document. No title. Just a page. And I typed the first words that came into my head. They thought I'd cry. Instead, I got quiet. That was the moment I stopped being the good employee. That was the moment I started writing the letter. Not the one I'd hand Cheryl just yet. But the one that would eventually make her regret everything. It wasn't just the pay cut. That was the final slap. The bruises had been forming long before, quiet ones. The kind you couldn't prove, but you could feel. I had joined Langford Creative fresh out of grad school, young, eager, believing that talent would speak for itself. I was the first one in, last one out. Volunteered for everything. Stayed late on holidays. Took on the impossible accounts no one wanted. At first, Cheryl praised me. Called me a go-getter. Said I had fire. But the more capable I became, the more invisible I became. It started small. One of my first solo campaigns brought in a luxury spa chain that had ghosted our agency for months. I built their rebrand from scratch, research, strategy, execution. The presentation nearly broke me from nerves, but the client signed a 6-month retainer on the spot. In the meeting the next day, Cheryl stood before the team and said, "I'm thrilled our vision brought them in. Not my strategy. Not my pitch deck. Our vision." She didn't look at me. Just smiled and moved on. I swallowed it. That same year, 2 promotions opened up. I applied for both. The roles went to people who had half my client wins and twice the self-congratulation. When I asked Cheryl what I could improve, she said, "You're good at execution, Danielle. But you lack the polish for leadership." Polish. Because I didn't schmooze. Because I didn't gossip in the break room or wear heels tall enough to make eye contact with her. There was a subtle current in our office. It always ran under the surface, never loud enough to cause HR issues, but constant enough to shape everything. The men were driven. I was too intense. They took initiative. I was impatient. They networked. I was trying too hard. Once, after a Friday happy hour, Cheryl pulled me aside and said, "Try smiling more during meetings. You'll seem less cold." I had just led a $90,000 campaign launch. But she wanted a smile. The worst of it came last fall. A major account, an athletic apparel brand with deep pockets, was on the verge of canceling due to bad press. Our team was flailing. Cheryl panicked. I stayed up for 3 nights reworking their entire digital campaign strategy. Repositioned them around eco-initiatives, built a crisis PR angle, and gave the CEO 3 solid talking points that reframed the backlash as a transformation moment. It worked. They stayed. They signed an even bigger contract. Cheryl announced it at the Monday meeting like it had fallen from the heavens. "A huge win for our team," she said. Then she winked at me as if we were in on a secret together. But I wasn't smiling anymore. After that, I started keeping receipts. Every project I touched went into a locked folder on my cloud drive. Every email I wrote was BCC'd to a private archive. Every client meeting, I took silent notes, with names, dates, contributions. Not because I planned to use them, but because I knew someone else eventually would. I also started watching Cheryl more carefully, how she twisted words, how she framed failures, how she blamed down and praised up. She wasn't just bad at leadership. She was good at erasing people. I think she believed I'd never leave. That I was too loyal, too invested, too broke to walk away. But she misunderstood something crucial. I wasn't staying because I couldn't go. I was staying because I hadn't finished watching. Not yet. The first few days after the salary cut were surreal. I kept thinking maybe it was a mistake. That Cheryl would send a follow-up email clarifying the numbers. That HR would intervene. That someone would realize how wrong this was. No one did. My bank account started shrinking like a dying plant. I canceled my gym membership. Stopped ordering groceries and started living off ramen and peanut butter. I avoided my landlord's texts about the rent increase and skipped 3 friend birthdays because I couldn't afford to bring a gift, or even show my face. Every time I opened my banking app, I felt sick. But I still showed up to work. On time. Dressed like nothing had changed. Because appearances still mattered. Because I needed every remaining paycheck. And, most of all, because I wasn't finished collecting evidence. The real shift wasn't financial. It was psychological. Cheryl didn't just cut my pay. She stripped away every ounce of dignity that came with my job. She stopped inviting me to strategy meetings. My name disappeared from email threads I once led. Instead, I was handed menial tasks with tight deadlines and no relevance to my role. "Can you print out these packets for me? Make sure the lunch orders are right for the Friday team meeting. Run down to the 3rd floor and check if the printer's out of ink." This was a company where I'd once pitched to $1 million clients. Now I was getting coffee orders wrong because no one told me there was a second Sarah on the team. I kept a smile on my face through it all. Even when it stung. But inside, I was taking notes. Every task. Every comment. Every insult dressed as banter. Then came the moment. It was a Tuesday. The office was unusually full because of a visiting board member. Everyone was tense, trying to look busy, polished, important. I had just returned from the cafe downstairs, balancing a cardboard tray of 6 coffees. Cheryl had asked for an oat milk cappuccino with cinnamon. It wasn't on the menu, but I tried. I handed her the drink. She looked at it like I'd given her motor oil. "No cinnamon?" she asked, loud enough for half the floor to hear. "They didn't have any," I replied, keeping my voice calm. Cheryl turned to the rest of the team, all pretending not to listen. "Well," she said with a smirk, "let's just keep Danielle on coffee runs, seems like that's all she can afford anyway." Laughter. From someone. I didn't look to see who. I just stood there, coffee still in hand, jaw tight. Cheryl didn't even notice. She had already turned away. That was it. Not the pay cut. Not the erased credits. Not the missed promotion. That moment when she turned me into a punchline. Not because I failed. But because she could. Because she knew I couldn't fight back. Because she thought I was small. That night, I walked home instead of taking the bus. It gave me time to think. Time to feel every sting. Every bruise. Every piece of my identity they'd stripped away. But something else formed in that silence too. Resolve. Not rage. Not bitterness. Precision. I realized then, this wasn't about money. It was about control. About humiliation. About reminding me I had no power. They thought I was too scared to leave. They thought I'd stay broken. They were wrong. When I got home, I opened my laptop. I pulled out the folder I'd been building, the emails, campaign files, original concepts, creative drafts, timestamped cloud backups. I gave it a name. Exit Plan, Final. I didn't know when I'd use it. But I knew I would. Soon. I didn't rage quit. I didn't cry in the break room. I didn't start loudly applying to jobs on company time like some kind of last stand martyr. I did what women like me are conditioned to do when we're humiliated. I got quiet. And then I got smart. The very next morning, I arrived at work 20 minutes early. Logged in. Opened my personal Gmail on a private tab. And started uploading. Every campaign I had ever built, from concept sketches to email sequences to final video ads, went into a password-protected drive. Organized by year, client, and role. I included notes, timestamps, revision threads, and proposal decks. If I'd touched it, it was in there. It wasn't just proof of my work. It was proof of who did the work. Because in an office like ours, ownership blurred fast. Too fast. Next, I updated my resume. No flair, no embellishments. Just facts. I listed real numbers, grew account revenue by 47% in Q3. And made sure to remove the agency's name from my email signature. Then I opened LinkedIn in incognito mode and started searching. I didn't blast applications everywhere. I was surgical. I picked 5 boutique firms I'd admired from afar, places that celebrated individuality, that let creators actually create. 3 days later, I had 2 interviews lined up. One virtual. One in person. I told no one. Not even my closest coworker. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted leverage. That same week, something strange happened. Cheryl became friendly. Complimented my outfit. Praised my can-do attitude. Asked me to stay late for a creative brainstorm on a new investor deck. Red flag. So I stayed late. I listened. I nodded. And then I heard it. My concept. The one I'd drafted 6 weeks earlier. The one she had dismissed during a Friday meeting as too abstract and not in line with our brand. Now, she was pitching it like it had been her idea all along. Imagine a campaign built around quiet luxury, she said to the team. Minimalist visuals. No hard sell. Just mood, space, and message. It's fresh. Uncluttered. Emotional. She even repeated one of my lines word for word. Don't sell the product. Sell the peace it brings. I didn't flinch. Didn't call her out. I just opened my phone under the table and voice recorded the meeting. Then, I went home and found the original draft, dated, time-stamped, tagged with metadata from the day I built it. Even included an email chain where I'd send it to Cheryl. The next morning, I contacted an old client. A high-end skincare brand I had helped stabilize after a PR meltdown the year before. We hadn't spoken in months. But I still had the marketing director's number saved under her name, Erica, real one. I sent her a short message. Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to thank you again for letting me help reposition your brand last year. I may be making a shift soon. Would love to reconnect if you're open to a quick chat. She responded in 8 minutes. We set a call. By the end of the week, I had a standing offer. If you move, we'd love to work with you again. Even freelance. Just say the word. Meanwhile, the office buzzed with whispers of an upcoming investor pitch. Cheryl was leading it. And guess what she was planning to showcase? My campaign. The one I created, shelved, and now watched being resurrected under her name. They were prepping to pitch it to a venture group known for buying controlling stakes in boutique agencies. If it landed, Cheryl would be elevated. Promoted. Paid. I watched her rehearse the speech twice. I watched her assistant assemble the deck. And then I downloaded the entire folder onto a private, encrypted drive. Every file, every slide, every quote lifted from my concepts. All of it. I didn't delete anything. I didn't alter a thing. I just made sure I had the originals. Because if they were going to profit from my voice, I was going to make sure I owned the echo. The job offer came in a quiet email with a subject line that simply read, "We're ready when you are." I clicked it while standing in the elevator, on my way to Cheryl's office to drop off a revised version of the pitch deck. Inside, a formal offer letter. A 6-figure salary, double what I was now making after the cut. Title, Creative Lead. Full ownership over campaign development. Start date, flexible. We believe in your voice, it said. Let us help you use it. I read it again on the walk back to my desk. Twice more that night in bed. And by morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I didn't accept right away. Not officially. I called them the next afternoon and said calmly, I'd like to take the offer. But I have one condition, I need a 2-week delay before I join. There was a pause on the other end. Then, of course. We can wait. Just let us know when to announce it. I smiled, thanked them, and muted the call. 2 weeks. That's all I needed to make this unforgettable. Back at Langford Creative, the energy shifted. Cheryl was suddenly everywhere. Strutting through meetings, talking loudly about big things coming, rehearsing for the investor pitch like she was auditioning for a TED Talk. I watched her wear my words like designer labels. She practiced my lines. She recited my positioning angles. She used my strategy to frame the agency's growth story. She even pulled me into her office one afternoon and said, in her phone-nurturing tone, Danielle, I know things have been bumpy, but I just want to say, I appreciate your loyalty. Loyalty. I smiled. Nodded. And printed another copy of my original concept draft, just in case. That week, I made myself useful. Overly useful. I stayed late. Took meeting notes. Offered to tighten up the investor pitch copy. Even brought Cheryl coffee, with cinnamon. She never questioned it. Because people like her never notice the ones they've already decided are beneath them. She thought I was obedient. Grateful. Beaten down. She didn't know I had already left, mentally, emotionally, professionally. I was just waiting for the right time to take my hands off the wheel. The pitch was scheduled for a Monday. By Friday, Cheryl was glowing. The investor team from Halston Group was flying in. They'd be in the room. In person. Big money. Big reputation. If this landed, Cheryl's star would rise fast. She assigned me to set up the room. Make sure the lighting's warm, the coffee's fresh, and the deck's preloaded on both screens, she said, without making eye contact. I nodded. Quiet. Calm. Efficient. Exactly how she liked me. That night, I cleaned out my desk. But not in the way people do when they're fired. No boxes. No dramatics. Just a quiet removal of anything personal. I left one thing in the drawer. An envelope. Sealed. Labeled, for Cheryl, open before the pitch. And beneath it, a copy of the pitch deck, annotated. Every slide that used my work was marked. Each concept matched with timestamps, original drafts, and email trails. No rage. No accusations. Just facts. I walked out of that office for the last time on Friday evening. The sky was pink with spring light. My steps felt slow, grounded. Lighter than they had in months. They thought I was staying because I needed them. Truth is, they just didn't know I had options. They didn't know I had a backup plan. Didn't know I had already handed off my client contacts to my future team. Didn't know that the quiet little creative was about to walk out of their story and write her own. On the train home, I stared out the window and let the silence wrap around me. Not emptiness. Not defeat. Just space. The kind of space I hadn't had in years. Inner monologue. They thought I was broken. I was just patient. Monday arrived with blue skies and nerves that didn't belong to me. I was up before sunrise. Showered. Dressed. Pressed a dark blazer over a silk blouse, clean lines, quiet power. Not corporate chic. Not approval-seeking. Intentional. Final. Free. I arrived at the office before anyone else. Just like I used to when I cared. But today wasn't about caring. Today was about closure. I walked past the receptionist, past the frosted glass wall with Langford Creative's logo, and into the boardroom where Cheryl would soon make the biggest presentation of her career. The room was pristine. Every chair aligned, every screen glowing. I placed a single envelope on the table in front of her seat. It read, "Before you present this, D. Lawson." Plain. Unthreatening. Quiet. But heavy in its consequence. I didn't wait for anyone. I returned to my desk, gathered my last items, a notebook, a plant I never watered, a photo of my sister and me laughing by a food truck in New Orleans. And then I did what so few people in that building had the nerve to do. I walked away without permission. Back in the boardroom, the clock ticked. Cheryl swept in 15 minutes before the pitch, flanked by 2 junior associates and a freshly blown-out hairdo. Her eyes were wide with ambition. She saw the envelope. Her brows furrowed, but she didn't open it right away. Not in front of her audience. She tucked it under her laptop and moved on with her usual bravado. The investors arrived. Coffee was poured. Smiles exchanged. The pitch began. But Cheryl didn't get far. 3 slides in, her assistant leaned down and whispered something. Urgent. Panicked. "Danielle's gone," she said. "And, you need to read that letter." Inside the envelope. A formal resignation letter, effective immediately. A notarized IP claim listing every campaign, concept, and deliverable I'd created, backed by cloud timestamps, emails, drafts, and a digital trail she couldn't erase. A cease and desist warning regarding the investor pitch, citing unauthorized use of my original creative material. A carbon copy list of recipients. Langford HR. Langford Legal. Halston Group's full investor board. My new employer. The client Cheryl had tried to steal from under me. And a final note, written by hand. "You asked me to be grateful. Instead, I chose to be precise. D. Lawson. I never saw Cheryl's face when she read it. But I can imagine it, flushed, blinking fast, voice tight with disbelief. I imagine the way the air must have shifted when the investors learned the pitch had to be paused. The way whispers would have spread like ink across water. Because without my work, there was no pitch. I didn't wait to hear the fallout. I was already blocks away, sitting in a quiet cafe with my new team lead from Everland Studio, the competitor who had seen my value before Cheryl ever would. She smiled as I slid her my phone. "Any trouble on your last day?" she asked. I just shook my head. "Not for me," I said. "But I think Cheryl's going to have a really interesting Monday." By noon, my phone lit up with alerts. Langford had issued a brief delay on the investor meeting. Rumors swirled that a creative lead had walked out mid-project. A LinkedIn post from Erica, the skincare client, praised the importance of credit and creative ownership. And Cheryl? She went radio silent. I didn't do it for revenge. Not really. I did it because people like her thrive on silence, on the idea that we won't speak up, won't claim what's ours, won't walk away. But I did. And I left her with something more powerful than anger. I left her with consequences. My first day at Everland Studio was everything Langford never was. No condescending "welcome to the team" speeches. No fake smiles or coffee-fetching tests. Just a clean desk, a collaborative meeting, and one simple line from the creative director. "We hired you because you already lead. Now go do what you do." And so, I did. Within a week, I was assigned a major project, an international skincare campaign that focused on real beauty, not airbrushed models. It was bold. Clean. Emotional. Exactly my lane. I took the fragments of the shelved ideas I'd once hidden at Langford, polished them, rebuilt them, and, this time, put my name front and center. I worked with a team that listened. Designers who didn't second-guess every choice I made. Copywriters who quoted me in pitch decks instead of rewording my lines. Account managers who said, "She's the brains behind this" in front of the client, not behind closed doors. The difference wasn't just the paycheck. It was the respect. By week 3, our campaign launched. We didn't expect it to go viral. But it did. Within 48 hours, the brand's unfiltered series was trending across platforms. Major influencers reposted the visuals. Celebrities quoted the tagline. "Beauty that breathes. Not beauty that hides." Then came the articles. The woman behind the campaign changing beauty standards. Danielle Lawson, the quiet creative taking center stage. For the first time, I saw my name attached to my work, and no one tried to edit me out of the story. One evening, while reviewing new concept sketches, my phone buzzed. It was my old colleague from Langford, Sam. We hadn't spoken in months, but the message was brief. "You were right to walk away. Cheryl's been demoted. Investors pulled out. Whole pitch collapsed." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not smiling. Not gloating. Just still. Because when you're in survival mode for so long, you forget what it feels like to be safe. You forget what peace feels like until it returns. I didn't share the news with my team. Didn't run to social media. Didn't text Erica. Didn't dance in celebration. Because this story wasn't about Cheryl anymore. She wasn't the villain I needed to defeat. She was just a symptom of a system that chews up women like me and rewards those who take from us without asking. She used my work to climb. I used my worth to walk away. Sometimes, people say I got revenge. But that's not quite right. I didn't sabotage them. I just stopped protecting them. It's wild how fast the silence changes sides. How the people who once ignored your voice suddenly whisper your name in rooms you've never stepped into. Not because you screamed. But because you stopped asking for permission. The ballroom was full, but quiet. Hundreds of women in sharp blazers and soft sweaters filled rows of chairs, notebooks in their laps, lanyards around their necks. It was the closing session of a Women in Business Summit, something I never would have attended 2 years ago. I didn't believe in panels. I didn't believe in advice from people with perfect LinkedIn headshots and buzzwords for breath. But now, standing backstage with a mic clipped to my collar, I felt ready. Not to perform, but to tell the truth. When they introduced me, they didn't list my past titles. No mention of Langford Creative. No laundry list of accolades. Just a simple, human intro. Please welcome Danielle Lawson, Creative Director at Everland Studio, and the mind behind the Unfiltered campaign. Applause. I stepped out into the light. The mic caught the first few beats of my breath. Then I spoke. I want to tell you a story, I began. Not about revenge. Not about a villain. Just about a letter, and a woman who stopped waiting to be chosen. There were no slides. No graphs. Just my voice and a room full of women who had, at some point, been underestimated, dismissed, or told to smile more. I spoke carefully. Honestly. Not naming names. Not dragging companies. I talked about a woman who gave everything to a job that thanked her with silence. I described how she kept showing up, even when her worth was buried beneath someone else's ego. And how one day, after they slashed her salary and her dignity in the same breath, she stopped asking why. And started preparing. I told them about a campaign. A pitch. A letter. And a room that fell quiet when the truth finally spoke louder than the politics. Afterward, during the Q&A, a woman in the second row raised her hand. How did you know when to walk away? She asked. I smiled. Not because I had a perfect answer, but because I remembered the exact second it all clicked. I didn't know, I said. But I realized I was already gone long before I left. I was just waiting to stop being afraid. When the talk ended, a small crowd gathered to shake my hand. Some thanked me. Others just nodded, eyes glassy with understanding. One young woman stood last in line. She looked barely 22. She held out a notebook and asked softly, "Can I see your card?" I reached into my blazer pocket and handed it to her. She read it aloud. Danielle Lawson. Creative Director. She looked back up at me. That's a good title. I nodded. It's not just the title. It's the first time it's actually mine. That night, back at the hotel, I placed the extra cards on the nightstand. Stared at the name in raised ink. No edits. No borrowed credit. No one else's fingerprints. Just mine. I don't tell this story to sound victorious. I tell it because someone else needs to hear it before they give up. Someone else is sitting at their desk, biting their tongue, making magic that someone else will claim. Someone else thinks being quiet is the same as being safe. But it's not. Silence only protects the people already holding the mic. They cut my salary because they thought I was powerless. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told to be grateful while your value was quietly erased, this story is for you. Hit that like button if Danielle's quiet strength moved you. Subscribe for more real, emotional stories of dignity, power, and poetic justice. And drop a comment below. Have you ever written a letter they didn't see coming?